Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Sarah and today I'm talking with mushroom expert Eric Puro, and we're going to be discussing mushrooms such as lion's mane, Chaga, Reishi, Cordyceps, Psylocbe and more. We discuss improving brain function, improving focus, improving energy, also lowering inflammation, and we also go into the do's and don'ts and the hows and whens of using medicinal mushrooms, such as, is the whole mushroom better than a tincture? What's the best way to know whether the mushroom you're actually buying is what you think it is? If you want to purchase any of the mushrooms we talk about in this podcast, if you want to purchase any of the mushrooms that we talk about in this video from Kaapa Biotech, Kaapa kindly provided me with a 10% discount code. So just use the discount code Dr. Sarah to get 10% off. So welcome back to the channel again, Eric. Do you want to tell people a bit about yourself, just so that they know why you are probably one of the most expert people on the planet in mushrooms of all variety?
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me back. We had a great chat last time. I think we met at the Biohacker Summit back in Helsinki some years ago.
Yes, I think it was like 5 years ago, and you were the person that introduced me to medicinal mushrooms. So things have really changed in the medicinal mushroom field since then. So I'll just let you explain to people where you're at so they know what a treat they're in for today.
Well, a quick intro about myself. So just to make it short, I'm the chairman and CEO and co-founder of a company called Kaapa Biotech and Kaapa Mushrooms in particular. And we are, a vertically integrated company growing a lot of different kinds of medicinal mushrooms, harvesting them from the wild as well, and then doing all the extraction and drying and grinding and processing here in Finland. And then we're also, doing final processing and then shipping it basically all around the world. And we sell in Asia and North America, also UK, and here around Europe. And I'm also on the executive committee of the International Medicinal Mushroom Society. So one of the main values here at Kaapa is a commitment to science. And that is one thing we take very seriously. So we have about a 4-person science team in the company. And they help educate me to make sure I know what I'm saying. So I think I've come along a long way in the last 5 years on my knowledge about mushrooms. And I think back then, it was interesting, right? The medicinal mushroom space. It was like, whoa, these things are doing things plants have never been purported to do before. There's something really interesting about these mushrooms. And we took a bet, and the bet was, before the big mushroom trend, let's just focus on this thing and learn about it and build up and vertically integrate and figure out the best ways to do different extraction technologies or how we grow them. And luckily enough, the bet we took really paid off. And now the industry is just blow up. I think there's a new startup company with mushrooms probably in Europe every day, almost, it seems like. So we're happy to be here, happy to be part of this industry, and happy to be, a lot of more people are becoming excited about these medicinal mushrooms.
I know. I think, what would you say the most important difference between medicinal mushroom therapy versus regular plant therapy for people who maybe have never considered mushrooms but like using plants?
Yeah, I think that well, obviously they're both natural, incredibly safe. They have very low toxicity levels. So when we look at safety data testing, like we've done this, our company, these GRAS reports, so generally recognized as safe, so we can sell with the FDA in the US. And you have to be consuming 0.5 kilo a day of really nicely concentrated, great mushroom extract powder to really have any toxic side effects. And those reports are signed off by toxicology experts, food safety experts, all that. So we know that they're really safe. And we also work with some doctors in Spain who've done rat trials on our material. And they've given 600 times the recommended daily dose to these rats. And the worst they get is a bit farty, so so really then they're super safe in a way. As biohackers, we can experiment taking a bit more or a bit less, whatever we feel comfortable with. It's a safe space. And I feel comfortable telling people that it's really safe to use for medicine. We have over 10,000 studies showing the clinical effects of helping support a normal chemotherapy regime as well. So when we're looking at the body in its most destroyed form, ravaged by cancer, being given, chemotherapy drugs, which are really suppressing the immune system and really harming our body a lot, that medicinal mushrooms are still super safe to take in those environments as well. So I think, the whole spectrum, they're very safe to take. But I'd say that, the reason that I think most people that mushrooms contain these effective compounds is that we're more closely related to mushrooms than we are to plants. And when I learned that, it was like my mind was blown. I was like, okay, whoa, all right, there's something really going on here. And so we breathe CO2 just like mushrooms. We take in oxygen just like mushrooms. We have a lot of the same ailments that mushrooms get. The flu, they can also get a form of cancer. I mean, the same things that ail them, it will ail our bodies, and our immune systems are not so separate. So when humans evolved our immune system, we built up really strong cell walls to reduce the ability for viruses to come in and kind of take over the cell. What mushrooms did was they developed a lot of chemical compounds to help protect their cell walls. And the nice thing is we have a lot of receptors for those compounds. So I think it's a nice, they're a nice source. And I think they're just a lot more complex than plants. So the way you prepare them, the way you grind them, the heat that they can be accepted to, the extraction technology that you need to use, it's much more complex. So I think that's sort of why this has been taking so long. Whereas we've had plant medicine for decades and decades and known about it. We're only now talking really about mushrooms.
Okay, that's really interesting, because there's so many different mushrooms I want to talk about. Because just before we dive in, have you read Merlin Sheldrake's book about fungi? Because I always try and mention some books for the listeners who are new to mushrooms that they'll really love, because he's looking at it from lots of different perspectives, just as a matter of interest.
Yeah, he's fantastic. Actually, I know him personally.
Yeah.
Because he actually reached out to our company some months ago, and he's buying liters of our mushroom extract from us, because he's using them so much in his own daily practice that he doesn't want to keep buying all the small bottles. And I said, yeah, absolutely. We send you a really good price, and we send you some liters. And I think that's the case when you're something like Merlin Sheldrake, and you come at this from a biology standpoint or more of a traditional scientific standpoint, and you start to learn and be fascinated by fungi. The more you realize, like, well, why am I also not taking Chaga every day? Why am I not taking lion's mane every day? Why I have sleeping problems? Why am I not taking reishi? And even guys like this, they're not traditional biohackers. They're not super into their health necessarily, but they see the value.
Oh, definitely, because I think mushroom therapy has been around for longer than we realise. Because as people know, Amanita muscaria or fly agaric's my favourite mushroom, and I've looked into it in massive detail. And people have been using that for thousands of years as tinctures, and then it's got the reputation of being poisonous. I mean, we won't start with that mushroom because it'll put people off. But in terms of talking about medicinal mushrooms, say if somebody's brand new, what one would you say they could start with, and then we'll start to work through them all, because they're each different. And I sometimes feel lion's mane gets loads of attention and turkey tail gets neglected, and I think Cordyceps is better than Chaga. And I just think sometimes we need to go through all of them and explain to people, okay, this is good for that. Because you mentioned a few, but where would you like to start as like a beginner mushroom?
Good question. I think Amanita muscaria is definitely the final boss, when you're playing the game of mushrooms. But I think that I'd say Chaga is a pretty easy one to get started with. I think it's a general overall health tonic. It's super supporting our bodies, and especially, probably many of your listeners are interested in longevity as a concept. I think that means things to different people. For me, what that means is that I don't want to live till I'm 300. That's not my goal. But I would love to live till I'm 100 and have great quality of life, right? I've got 3 kids. They take a huge amount of my effort. Probably they're going to have grandkids, and maybe even I see grandkids. Who knows if I live that long? I've got sheep, I've got chickens, I've got bees, I've got a small farm. So, for me, I want to live this beautiful life as much and full as I can. And that's what longevity is for me. And one of the things that I take for that is a high regimen of antioxidants. And Chaga is the highest gram for gram of any antioxidants on the planet. So if we look at the ORAC value, which is a way that we test total antioxidant capacity of something like blueberries, it's about 2,500, 4,000. Chaga can be up to 250,000. Wow. So it's just, totally different ballgame that you're playing with Chaga. So you can take such a small dose and have a really effective outcome. And I think you probably have studied this a lot, these Mediterranean countries that just seem to have a great quality of life and longevity. And one of the benefits they have is a diet rich in antioxidants. I know for Americans, the biggest source of antioxidant they have is coffee, and they're only drinking 1 cup a day. And we know coffee beans have antioxidants, but it's also really little. So many of us are probably very devoid of antioxidants. We're very antioxidant poor in our diet. Probably in the UK as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. And when it comes to Chaga, what other benefits does it have? Because I knew about the ORAC value because they used to be people used to be obsessed with the acai berries, but I've got a feeling, and in the research they've been disproved in a horrible way, and they've
Yeah.
disgracefully left the scene. Whereas I know there's one paper on Chaga when some idiot took a stupid amount and he had a kidney issue, and other than that, they are extremely safe. But what if
Yeah.
there any things people should be careful about with
The
Chaga?
two things to watch out with Chaga is what you're absolutely right. There has been one reported death from medicinal mushroom usage, and that was actually from Chaga, and it was in a hospital in Japan. And so that's why it's really well documented, because she was in the hospital and they were monitoring everything that she was taking. And Chaga is quite high in oxalates, so trace minerals. And as you know, trace minerals are great. I mean, I take bone broth. I'm a hunter. I'm making bone broth soup. I'm adding it the whole winter and the summer to everything that I make. Seaweed is another great source of trace minerals. And our body needs those trace minerals to help balance the pH of our gut, right? Our stomach, large intestine, small intestine. But if we have too much, we tend to crystallize those, and then they have to get passed through the kidney, and that can be really rough on our kidney. So this particular patient had kidney cancer, and was treating herself with taking really high dose of Chaga, about 100 grams a day. So she was basically, her kidney was already not functioning very well, was already really stressed and having a tough time. And then, 100 grams a day is adding a lot of oxalates to our body. So, and in Japan, when you're eating a lot of seaweed and things rich in trace minerals, you're usually, that's a place, they're not devoid of trace minerals usually. So it's just a lot of things that all stacked on top of each other that really cause that death. But it's something to be careful of. I mean, it's what I like to say is if something can't kill you, then it's not doing anything. Right. I mean, if it can kill you, it obviously has some potency. It has some interesting compounds. It has something that's going on there. So if we know what those compounds are and why it works, then I think it's really important. So again, Chaga is totally safe to take a few grams a day. Absolutely no problem. It's a great, especially if your diet's, devoid of trace minerals. But the other thing you have to watch for with Chaga is that it can it can dilute your blood. So it thins your blood quite a lot. So it can lower your blood pressure. And normally for healthy people, this is a great thing, actually. This is really healthy, reduces like a cholesterol buildup, makes the heart system work a bit easier. It's generally great for your health. But if you're on blood thinning medication, it can be dangerous. And we've had, of course, some customers, have problems with that, where they go in for, testing their blood thinning, how thin their blood is to the doctor, and the doctor goes, whoa, you're way too thin. And usually, unfortunately, the doctor's recommendation is to stop taking the Chaga, whereas I think it could be an interesting conversation to the doctor to say, maybe I don't need to take so much pharmaceutical blood thinning medication. I was just actually in Spain for the last 2 weekends, one in Madrid and one in Barcelona, and I was giving a lecture to over 700 doctors about medicinal mushrooms. And it was amazing to see, because in Finland, our doctors here are not treating with any natural medicine. They're not prescribing any medicinal mushrooms, any like that. And in Spain, they totally are. So I'm meeting with doctors who are working the hospital system that pretty much, along any chemo regime, they're giving medicinal mushrooms, they're giving our products. They're working with people who have, long-term mental health issues, they're giving lion's mane. It's amazing to see, and they have great results. So I think the more we learn about this, the more of this kind of becomes mainstream and people accept it, and doctors will be prescribing this kind of thing.
Oh, definitely, because I know in Japan they use medicinal mushrooms a lot, and because I suppose we've given Chaga a bit of a show, and I know turkey tail is popular in Japan, and a lot of people have never heard of turkey tail, and it's one of my favorite mushrooms. So maybe you want to tell people.
Yeah, actually, I have it on my desk right now.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it's a really important one. But yeah, you're right. It's probably our least best seller. I mean, for any listeners who are in the EU, it's an unapproved novel food. And what just basically that means is we can't sell it here in the EU. It hasn't went through EU approved safety trials. But in the UK, it seems to be totally fine for sale. In the US, of course, it's fine for sale. In Japan, like you said, they've been using it for, hundreds, if not thousands of years. And I've been in Japan, and I've met a lot of these doctors and, big health food companies there. And I've seen, human cells on a petri dish given turkey tail, and they just disappear. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic for all forms of cancer. I mean, in Japan, basically our product, a turkey tail tincture, or we also make powder, of course, too, but basically extracted turkey tail is what they give people if they have breast cancer. It's just, that's the regimen. Go home and take your turkey tail. And it's a really powerful mushroom. And it's also the reason I don't take it every day. I have some reverence for it. I mean, I think it's so strong that I'd rather wait till I have breast cancer or some form of cancer to really start to mess with it too much. But it's on my desk, and I take it maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks, something like that.
Yeah, definitely, because I knew it was very big for cancer, and also and we'll get to later about having holidays from mushrooms and not taking too much together.
Yeah.
And then obviously, and I noticed that I couldn't find and buy Cordyceps directly from you, but I could buy your Cordyceps from other places. So do you want to dive into Cordyceps? Because I know that you can, there are companies selling the wrong part of the fungus, and it's quite interesting because it's very powerful, but there's snake oil Cordyceps out there.
Yeah, definitely there is. We worked with a company in England called London Nootropics, and they're making some mushroom coffee powders.
Oh, yeah, I know them. Yes.
And they were selling our Cordyceps for the longest time, and we had, it was fantastic. I mean, in the UK we can sell Cordyceps, but in Europe, of course, we can't. And I think that, I mean, this is a regulatory discussion that's probably maybe boring for your listeners, but it's a technicality that we can't do it. Of course, they're safe. You've been used in the US for 35 plus years. They've been imported there. In China and Japan, they've been used also for a long time. South Korea, thousands of years. But I think what's interesting is to think why we want to take Cordyceps. And I think a lot of times when we're looking at Cordyceps, we're thinking kind of sports nutrition, right? We're thinking vasodilation. We're looking at the amazing clinical trials they've done on VO2 max increasing, right? And I mean, probably many of your listeners know that, in any form of athleticism, usually our body's ability to take in oxygen is kind of the limiting factor at some point. I mean, sometimes it's our mind, but with high level athletes, it's always VO2 max. It's really what you're trying to develop. And before we actually, our company was the only company growing this Cordyceps militaris in Europe about 3-4 years ago. Now I think there's a couple more, but back then it was only us because it's a very difficult mushroom to grow. And we were the one who were controlled by the EU. So they came after us. And, we went through that whole process with them, and it all ended up being blacklisted and then for sale in the Europe. But we were selling to the Finnish Olympic team before that.
Oh, right.
So all the guys out there, who are skiing, long distance skiing, and then they do the rifle shooting. It's really super endurance. We're all taking our Cordyceps, and I think it's of course legal to take that as an athlete, especially even in the Olympics. It's not blacklisted. But it's super vasodilating. It also has cordycepin, which is increasing ATP. So it's allowing our body to have more actual cellular energy. And these are incredibly important things. And that comes from a compound called cordycepin, which is part of the adenosine family. And I think that that's a really important compound. And that's why we, as a company, like Cordyceps militaris very much. There is a form of Cordyceps that you can sell and buy in the EU, which is called Cordyceps sinensis. And Cordyceps sinensis doesn't contain almost any cordycepin. It's very little amounts. So our company has been sort of working with Cordyceps sinensis now for about a year, really trying to understand how we could grow that in a way that we could get something really that we feel proud to bring to the market, that we know is effective, and we just haven't been able to get there yet. So when I think that, for your customers that are listening, you really want to make sure you're getting Cordyceps militaris, not Cordyceps sinensis. And they're just different species. They look slightly different. They both, are parasitic and eating bugs in the wild, but of course, you have to be careful. And of course, the quality compound you're looking for there is cordycepin.
But also, I think last time we spoke, one of those compounds was going into clinical trials or had been in it for arthritis and was doing really well. And I can't remember what the outcome was.
So that was actually in the UK, professor. And she was also famous before this one. She found that cordycepin crossed the blood-brain barrier. And just before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about your work with jet lag. And I think this is really interesting. So cordycepin can cross the blood-brain barrier, and it actually suppresses melatonin production, right? So if you're trying to just quickly get yourself back on some new time zone, or you've got yourself out of whack, or you want to party all night, you always go to bed at 9:30, but here comes Sunday night and you want to have a fun party, Cordyceps can be really helpful in that way because of cordycepin. But it's also being tested for arthritis pain. So basically massive joint inflammation. And she was thinking that, because she mapped actually how it actually goes, what are the neurological processes that it goes through in the brain. And part of that was some pain receptors actually for arthritis specifically. So she was seeing a lot of interesting indications that we could be suppressing pain, with cordyceps as well for arthritis. And I don't think that she's published that paper yet, but that's really promising results, because I think arthritis for many people, it's usually just it's a problem with the symptoms, basically. I mean, it's just the pain and everything else, the joint stiffness. So if we can actually just solve the symptoms, it's livable then.
Oh, definitely, because I worked in physical rehab, and I still do for a long time. And I've looked at loads of MRIs and X-rays, and some people have got the most rotten backs and joints ever, and they don't have any pain at all. And that's the whole point. If you can control the inflammation with whatever, they have a perfectly normal life. So that's why I was really interested in it back then. And is it true that cordyceps can help with libido and testosterone and sex drive, or is it a bit like oysters, that it's a bit of a myth?
I mean, if you go work out and you get that kind of pump feeling, you feel fucking great, right? I mean, it's like, also if I go into the ice hole, which I'm going every morning, this big 2.5 dopamine increase, oh my God. And I think that, that's that really big dopamine spike that you can feel from the ice hole or from working out. I think that you get that from cordyceps a little bit too. So you get more ATP, you get more energy, you get a little bit more vasodilation. So you're getting a bit more VO2 max. You're just feeling better. Things are working a bit better. And of course, I think that's bringing libido up, and your confidence and your excitement for life and all that. I think a wise man once told me that cordyceps is a bit like, you get into a helicopter and it takes you to the top of a mountain and it drops you off. And you get to see what it's like to be on top of the mountain. And if you're depressed, or if you're at a party and you're not having fun, all of a sudden you start to really enjoy life again. But you have to figure out really, how to be there without the cordyceps also. But I think it's a really helpful tool. I recommend to all my friends who are having depression, and just say, hey, remember how good life is actually. Don't think that where you are in your mind right now needs to be permanent. And I think cordyceps can help people see the light at the end of the tunnel in that way.
Oh, that's really interesting, because now if we're going to talk about mental health, shall we move into reishi? Because I would say, same as you, cordyceps is for like vitality, but then reishi is another really interesting one, and I have recommended it for people who've got anxiety and insomnia. So what would you say, have to say about reishi?
Yeah, well, I think most of us actually, I think it's 30% people have insomnia.
Yeah,
that's crazy. I didn't know that. I actually just looked at that statistic for this doctor retreat that I was at. And I was pretty blown away. I mean, 30%, that's crazy. And I think I'm a big fan of, probably you are too, Huberman Labs. I mean, I love his podcast. I love his Instagram, everything about the guy, and just super fascinated. And he had such an interesting, it was his first or second podcast ever, which tells you something about how important it is. But he did it on sleep, and particularly how the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system work, and how all those things interact with our sleep cycles. And I've listened to it like 3 times, and one of the most interesting things that I think he said was how we form new, let's say, information, right? How we learn new things. And, before I listened to his podcast, I thought, probably like many of your listeners, or maybe even you at some point in your life, if you want to learn something, you open up a book, or you watch a YouTube video, or you go meet somebody and you talk to them or whatever, and you sit there and you pound the information and you read it, you take notes and blah, 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 blah. You pound the information and you're going to learn it. And what basically he found out with a study in his lab was that actually that information is only written in your brain during deep sleep. So if you're not getting enough deep sleep, if you have insomnia, or if you're a light sleeper, you only have REM sleep, you're not getting deep sleep to actually write new information to your brain, and you don't learn anything. So it doesn't matter how much you pound the keyboard or try to learn a new skill or try to advance your career. If you're not getting deep sleep, just don't bother. Just don't even do it.
That's really interesting, because the deep sleep happens between about 10 p.m. to 12 p.m. and then the REM is for processing emotional issues. So some people who get really stressed about waking up at 3 a.m. in the morning, it's actually, don't worry about it. You've had your deep sleep, and that's the important bit. And okay, it's annoying, but that's really important. So with reishi, does it enhance deep sleep or REM or both?
Yeah.
Or latency? I mean, how does it help with
so it's basically supporting non-REM sleep particularly. So and NREM sleep is what we say, but deep sleep. And it can increase that 20 to 50% in people, you know, and I think it's amazing nowadays, you know, we have these outer rings, right? Or we have some wearable, you know, they're not perfect, but we're able to get a glimpse of really what's going on in our body, or we can see trends over a long period of time. And I you know, I go to many dinners and I give lectures, and I always bring bottles of reishi and I put them on the table and I say, okay, we're going to be drinking some wine tonight. We're going to have some beer, you know, we're in Spain, Portugal, whatever, France. And, you know, why don't everyone take a little bit of reishi? And we know that reishi is also bringing our heart rate back down. So it's also supporting a good night's sleep, even if you're drinking a little bit. But it's working on over 50 different neurological pathways to support good sleep, mainly by increasing the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest, digest, relaxing state of our being. And so you're not sitting there worrying about things too much before you go to bed. You put your head on the pillow and, you know, within 15 minutes, you should be drifting off. And I think reishi is an incredible ally for that. We know that it's helping produce 5-HT in our guts, serotonin, and it's also stimulating GABA receptors. So it's really supporting this kind of deep sleep state. And I mean, you can see it the first night you take it. It doesn't take very long. So if you're looking at your outer ring data for a week, you know, start taking reishi and just compare those big macro trends. And I think it's quite helpful for many people.
Would you say it could potentially help with OCD? Because that's what I'm working with at the moment. Not me, but some untreatable people apparently. And I've been looking at vagus nerve stuff, and I do lots of other things as well. And, you know, I've got a massive pool of stuff to draw from. And the CEO who asked me to help their staff mentioned psilocybin. And I said, I don't think that's a good idea yet. So would you say reishi might be something that could help someone with OCD? Because what you mentioned about not sleeping and relaxing, and could you see anything going wrong with it for testing it on people? Because obviously that's very upsetting if somebody has OCD.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest question I get asked when lecturing for doctors is, you know, what are the side effects with pharmaceutical medication or clinically diagnosed like mental illnesses? And I think that's a gray space right now, to be totally honest. We don't know exactly. We don't have enough clinical data on that. But like I said, it's safe and effective and has been used for hundreds of years. And you know, the European Union has approved reishi 100% safely for anyone with any indication. So I think it would be worth trying out. I don't think you're going to do any harm. If anything else, it's going to be beneficial. Is it going to cure OCD? I wouldn't like bet my bottom dollar on that. But I think it could help eliminate some symptoms for sure. Yeah,
I think with people who I'm like that, who it's that serious, you need to pull from lots of different areas to down by 20 or 10% to help the person get out of their rut. And like you said, I can't foresee it doing anything wrong. And like anything, I think from my experience with the reishi is the really unusual dreams. So I think what have you got to say about that? Because there's like endless stories about reishi.
Yeah, it's so funny. I mean, this is one of the most asked questions we get just to our website. You know, people comment and asked us this, you know, why did I like have sex with my grandma last night? Like what is going on in my dreams right now? You know, this is the craziest stuff ever. And you know, we don't have a great answer for that. And I bring this up at every medicinal mushroom congress. I ask everyone who knows more than me this exact same question. And generally the answer that I get is that a lot of people get just such bad sleep that they don't have dreams a lot of times, that they're just not really dreaming or processing in that stage. And that reishi is actually just giving them dreams. And those are what dreams are. Dreams are having sex with your grandma and the weird aliens coming down and videotaping it and whatever the heck, you know, that is dreams. So the people who say I have really crazy dreams might just be experiencing dreams.
Yeah, that's really important, because actually if you have a really low, you know, if you have a really low redox level, one of the symptoms is you don't dream. So having dreams is healthy. So therefore, if reishi gives you dreams, it's doing something physiologically that you are deficient in to help you. So but I think it's like I always say to people, because they get quite worried about their dreams, I just say the subconscious likes to work in metaphors, and, you know, it's just its own language, and don't overanalyze it. And it just because, you know, that happened in your dream, it doesn't mean you're a pervert or a...
That I'm into my grandma. Okay, good. I'm so happy to hear this.
Yeah, exactly. Because you've given away, you know, I think in the dream interpretation book, having sex with your granny and aliens filming, I don't think that's in my book. So
okay, well now you can put it in there.
It's out. So I think so back to the medicinal mushrooms.
Yeah.
Which I'm trying to think who else the shiitake and maitake, they're obviously important as well, because they're culinary mushrooms too, so you can buy them and eat them in the shop. And I think this would be a good time to talk about eating a mushroom and then eating a mushroom extract, any kind of mushroom. I actually find it's extremely different if it's an extract versus the whole thing.
Yep. Yeah. So those are a lot of great questions. I think the biggest thing, so now we're seeing this kind of like shroom boom, right? It's the second fastest growing trend in food and food supplements and nutraceuticals in the UK market, right? It's huge. And it's the fourth largest by sales in the category. I mean, it's just going everywhere. And so people are getting interested, and they're watching some TikToks, Instagram videos of like, lion's mane, good for your brain. Next thing, whatever. And they're getting these short little information, and they're trying it out. And I think, now is the point where we start to learn a little bit deeper. Hey, what is this? And how do I make educated decisions about what kind of product to buy? And that's really important. And I think, what you brought up here is a really good, one of those understanding points that people really need to get, is that mushrooms need extraction. So just like, we're mammals, human beings are mammals. We have an amazing gut to process, basically plants. Like we do really, really good at breaking down plant cell walls. They cause very little indigestion. You look at cows, so many creatures and mammals are so good at eating plants, and we've done that for so long. Mushroom cell wall is called chitin, and it's just much stronger, and it's much more difficult for our body to break down. And that's why we actually get some bloating or some cramping or some, gas. Like, they're just really hard for us to eat, actually. And so most people, actually over 50% of people, have a really tough time eating mushrooms. And they go, okay, mushrooms are bad for me, I'm not eating them. And I think that's a really valid point. They're really difficult for our bodies to break down. People don't take them. And that's effectively the same. That's why our gut is really bad at like digesting and opening up cell walls of those mushrooms. So as a medicinal mushroom company, and as selling a food supplement that's really helping your health, we want to make sure that the good nutrition and the good compounds that are inside of that cell are the cell walls open, and it's bioavailable for your body. And you do that through extraction. So, well, our company, when we started almost 6 years ago, wow. We started looking at researching what is the best extraction technology. And we didn't just copy paste everybody else. So if you look in the market right now, there's a lot about dual extraction is what they say. And dual extraction is basically water and ethanol. Some people call it triple extraction, but it's just hot water, cold water, and ethanol. It's basically the same thing as a dual extraction. And you're looking at, the water is if you make like hot tea and you put like a raw reishi, it'll be a bit bitter. So it's extracting something into the water. And if you do the same with alcohol, the alcohol is a chemical solvent that's dissolving that cell wall. So the mechanism of action there is important to understand. So what you have to do as a company is you need to put those mushrooms into a mixture of ethanol for about 3 months, and it needs shaken at least 3 times a day or continuously. So it's a very long and arduous process to actually do a dual extraction properly. And even at the best of that, you're getting about 50 to 60% bioavailability. And we've done studies on our material doing this. So we work with a laboratory in Portugal called CIMO, and we share like some European Union funding to learn more about medicinal mushrooms and the properties behind them and all these different questions. So we want to do research in Europe, European source research this way. And we found that, this dual extraction done for the most efficacious time, which is about 3 months, shaken 3 times a day, is about 50-60% bioavailable. When you look at a technology that we employ after searching literature review, just looking at studies and looking at, hey, what are the best way to do extraction? It was ultrasonication. And this is sort of a technology that's also pioneered by the hemp industry and the CBD industry, because it's so effective. It's ultrasonication is these high energy waves, and when they cross paths, they create a really tiny implosion, or like a explosion that goes in, and it just rips the cell walls apart super fast. So it doesn't take 3 months, and also it doesn't Yeah, doesn't cause any. You don't have to have alcohol in there either.
When I worked as a biochemist, we used to use sonicators all the time and ultrasonicators,
Yep.
because it's just magically you've got your bacteria or fungi or whatever all broken up in 10
Yep.
not like 3 hours. So
Yeah.
I can see how it worked. And yours is probably, and for people that don't know what it is, it's almost like using sound waves as well to
Yeah.
it's an implosion as well. So it's really interesting, but also it's like, as you say, it doesn't involve nasty solvents.
Yeah, I think it's really effective. And we found that this is over 92% effective at opening up cell walls and making the material bioavailable. And I mean, it's amazing. You can put this under HPLC, LS, MS, and and you can really find out, how much of those compounds are in the material at the end of the day, with dual extraction versus ultrasonication, and it's phenomenally different. So I think the important thing to know is that most companies that are doing dual extraction or triple extraction, pretty much everyone's buying it from China. So there's only maybe 1 or 2 other companies in all of Europe that are actually doing their own growing and extraction in-house. And majority of companies that we know, are not doing it for 3 months either. It's maybe a few days or a few hours even. So it's also then not as effective as 50%. So I think, what's important to know is that, but anyway, no matter how you extract, it's still better than not extracting. So, if you're taking just a mushroom powder that you go to the store, you buy shiitakes or buy Maitakes or lion's mane, grind it up, dry it, make a tea or something, or just eat the powder. Maybe it's a 5% bioavailability, and that's really not so great. So I think it's important to know what your extraction is, ensure what you're getting is really high quality in that way, or you might as well not even waste your time.
That's really important. Before I ask some more about testing of mushrooms that you can buy to make sure they're safe, when people want to use psilocybin versus the actual mushrooms, because it's very unusual to find just psilocybin to buy, whereas it's very easy to buy or do whatever you want with your own magic mushrooms or pick them. How much are people missing out on an experience by just eating the mushroom and not extracting the psilocybin? I mean, would it be orders of magnitude different? Because as much as I love mushrooms, I really don't like the psilocybin ones. They make me feel really sick. And there's other things I'd rather do. So that was just the question, back to what you were saying, not that anybody's allowed to extract psilocybin, but theoretically, what's your thoughts there? That would it be a completely different experience, or what's your thoughts?
Yeah, my thoughts would be, for sure it's totally different. And I think one of the themes that go through across all the mushrooms is beta glucans. Right. And beta glucans are immunomodulatory. They're the compound responsible for the adaptogenic properties of the mushroom. And psilocybin, if it's psilocybe mushrooms or psychedelic mushrooms like Amanita muscaria, even, they all have shiitake, maitake, reishi, chaga, whatever, all has a lot of beta glucans. And so to me, it's why not have a psychedelic that's also really helpful and immunoadaptogenic as well? And you're totally losing all that side, but would the experience be more powerful gram for gram if you extracted? For sure. 100%.
But also all of the studies on psilocybin, when I've read them, it's all an extracted psilocybin.
100%.
So I think those studies, because it is really important, and I'm not obviously trying to promote anything, the studies that happen with a therapist that are really promising with psilocybin, that's not people eating some mushroom. It's been specially extracted and it's guaranteed not to make people feel sick or be a bad mushroom. So I think it is a really interesting avenue for people who want to use that therapeutically. And I just wanted to confirm what I thought with you, that it's two different things, the mushroom versus the mushroom extract.
Definitely. And I think even those are chemically synthesized, even psilocybin compound. I mean, they're not even related they don't even touch the mushrooms at all anymore. They just do it in a lab. Because I think for those guys, they want a standardized dose. They want to really reduce any variation at all, so they can really nail down what the effect is.
Oh, definitely, because there's so much opposition to mushrooms, and especially psychedelic ones, that you have to do the science as best you possibly can. So back to the medicinal ones again, are there any medicinal mushrooms that are not so well known that you know about that you think are going to start to surface? Or are there any new products in Kaapa that are coming out?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to yeah, just to wrap that up, I think, at Kaapa, our philosophy is really that we want to extract the whole mushroom, So of course we have compound quality markers, and is it all for Chaga or Cordycepin for Cordyceps or Harrisanones for lion's mane or something like this, right? And of course, when we grow the mushrooms, we want to like A/B test different growing, procedures to ensure that we're focusing on these different compounds that we know are effective. But there's, just last year we found out that there's Harrisane A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You just never, you think and then all of a sudden you go, oh my God, you can go deeper in this thing. And I mean,
I see. So rather than looking for new mushrooms, making sure that the mushrooms you've got already, that you know everything about them, and all of the compounds are all standardized. Because I didn't know about C and D, I just knew about A and B. But
no, it's crazy.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's really important. So I'll let you carry on there.
Yeah, but I think at Kaapa, the biggest thing that we're working on right now is being the world's first company to have batch specific testing for secondary metabolites. So I think we've been in the market for a while, and the reason that we got started was we looked at the ingredients being sold on the market 6 years ago with the same stuff from China. It's the same stuff now. There's no innovation. There's no new quality upgrades. Same material as it was 35 years ago. And the main quality marker there is beta glucans, and beta glucans are great, right? I mean, immunodaptogenic. They go through the large intestine, they interact with killer T cells, and NK cell cytokines. They really help our immune system get boosted or limited if needed. They create homeostasis in our immunity, so they're really important. But people don't buy lion's mane for immunity. They just don't nowadays. They buy lion's mane for brain health, or they buy Cordyceps for energy, or Chaga for antioxidants and longevity, or it's these secondary metabolites to me and to our company that are more interesting. So as we're not buying any material from China. We're basically we're growing everything ourselves. We have complete control. So for us, it's like, hey, let's go where the market's going. Let's go where people are interested, and let's try to grow these for having higher levels of those compounds. The problem with that right now is the industry is really at a very infantile stage, and many times we like to convert it to like the Wild West, And we've sent samples to huge labs. I mean, multinational labs that are operating in the U.S. and in Europe, very respected labs, and to ask them to do do an HPLC machine test on Cordycepin. Tell me how much % of this material I send you from Cordyceps is Cordycepin. And they'll send it back, and it'll be something really high, and we'll go, whoa, okay, we did something great, my God. And we'll send the same sample to another lab to verify, and the other lab will be back to a level that we think is actually more appropriate, right? And we'll go, okay, well, lab one, what happened here? Why is it so high? They go, I don't know. That's the result we got. Okay, well, hey, can you give us your standard? What is the standard that you're using for that? And how HPLC machines work, just really short, is you have to find a pure standard of some compound. So in this case, if it's Cordycepin, you get a pure sample of 95% or more, pure Cordycepin, and you run an HPLC analysis on that. You find out, where the wavelengths are, and you compare it to your sample that you're doing. We found labs using standards from reishi mushroom to test our Cordycepin, or just crazy stuff.
That's pretty bad practice. That's kind of terrible.
It's horrible. Yeah. And they said, hey, it's a secondary metabolite for mushrooms. And we go, dude, it's like you're taking some compound from a birch tree and using that to do like rose root, like Rosvital and rose root versus butylenic acid. I mean, it's just crazy, and that's how uneducated the market is about mushrooms in general. So we looked at this about 9 months ago, and we said, hey, we can't trust these labs results at all. We had a lab tell us that our lion's mane fruiting body product had erinacine compound in it. Like it doesn't. We know it's scientifically, it's not in the fruiting body. So we just said enough is enough. We do this. We figure this out. So we've been working with a local university here in Finland, and in about, let's say, what is it right now? 1st of April-ish, early April, something like that. We're going to be in a big expo in London called NOPEX on the 15th of April, where we're going to release this to the public. And then, later we'll start actually having the products also listed for sale. But we'll be the first in the world to have batch-specific secondary metabolite testing, because we've worked at local university. We've bought the samples. We've had them develop their methods. They have a lab to do it. We send them samples. they can test it themselves and send it back to us. They're getting third-party lab verification done, and it's fantastic, because this way, if you look at a lot of companies, what they'll say is, this level of cordycepin is proven in our products. Here, look at the COA. And you open it up, you look at the COA, and it's a lab test that was done back in 2020. It's one lab test done on their material back in 2020. Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, but still, how does that reflect in 2023? Does your supplier have consistency? Did you just get one really good batch? And it's for a customer, it's not transparent. And I think that that's an issue, that people are starting to lose trust in these companies. So, for us, we're not going to tell you that we're the best in the world. I don't want to do that. I don't want to, we're going to tell you what's in your product. You're going to make that decision. Is that high enough quality for you or not? But we're going to release all that data, per batch. And we have a website that's now built that customers can take a look at the product. They can scan the QR code. They can go see exactly heavy metals, CFUs, secondary metabolites, beta glucan levels, everything in their product. And they can make that decision,
Wow,
so I think
that's really important, because I was going to ask you, because some plants and things tend to accumulate toxins by accident, like rice does and stevia used to. Do mushrooms do that as well?
Absolutely, massively more than plants, actually.
Right. Okay.
And then, not to scare you, but mushrooms are bioaccumulators. So they're taking everything from the soil. I mean, they're really greedy. They're just like, give it to me, and they store it. Yeah. And that's why we had a big radiation scare, right? I mean, with mushrooms, they were illegal to pick in the forest for some time even. But I mean, nowadays, cadmium is a big one that they pick up. Lead is a big one that they pick up. And it really depends on the substrate or the food that you're feeding the mushrooms. So usually that's wood, and the water that you're giving. Those are the two sources of contamination. And so, the reason that we do this in Finland is that we have the cleanest air and water ever measured on the earth, ever, anywhere ever measured. Antarctica, Finland has still cleaner air and water. So there's a very low risk of, what we do for our substrate is usually birch trees. We cut them down, grind them up, and that's what the mushrooms eat. And it's just, they're growing in such a pure environment that we have very little heavy metals. I mean, we're talking factors of 10 less than what the European Union allows for. So we never had any heavy metal issues, but it is an issue in the industry. I mean, many products from China, for instance, there was a really interesting study. I don't know if you caught it. I posted on my LinkedIn some days ago, but there was one of my colleagues at the International Medicinal Mushroom Society. He studied about 20 different products that were for sale on the Italian market, usually Amazon, someplace like this, all of Chinese origin. And what they did is they tested heavy metal levels in their lab, and they tested the DNA of the species to see what it was. And they found that basically most of the heavy metals for the products were over what the EU legal limits were allowed for. And they found that in 90% of the samples, it wasn't the species that the label said it was, right? So it stated that it's Graphola frondosa or Maitake, and it actually turned out to be Ganoderma lucidum or Reishi or something. 90%. So, that's 18 out of 20 products bought legally, totally on Amazon, very fulfillment, for prominent websites, different health food retail stores in the Italian market. DNA was wrong. I mean, and I feel like, okay, you can do that with potatoes or apples or something, but the products that our industry makes, these are to help people with their health. Like you said, people with OCD, people with ADHD, people going through chemo.
Well, yeah, because if you gave somebody Cordyceps and they were expecting Reishi, you could put them up all night, and that could be terrible for somebody with a mental health thing. It could push them over the edge if they didn't sleep or got really manic or hyper. But yeah, that's really terrible. I was aware of this, and I'm glad you have alluded to it, because as you say, there's people saying it's one thing and selling something totally different.
Yeah.
Just like,
yeah.
It's like selling vitamin A and then you've put vitamin D in the capsule.
Yeah.
It's actually really dangerous.
Yeah. And for us, that's why we just want to be transparent. We know customers don't trust anybody anymore. Like, there's a good reason to do that. Yeah. So, I think the more transparent you are and the more open and honest and the more things you show, I think is better,
Yeah, no, that's really important. And then I think, are there any other mushrooms we need to mention that people may not have heard about? the list.
I mean, we could talk about lion's mane, but probably your viewers know about it now. But it's the number
I don't
one.
know. I mean, never assume, no matter what, every day is a school day. And
Yeah,
I think with lion's mane, it's one of these things, like you said, people keep thinking it's just for brain or regrowing nerves, but it can do a lot more.
yeah,
There's a study starting in Bristol on lion's mane and dementia. So
yep,
I think it would be good for people to go through lion's mane again, because also if it's
yeah.
powerful for the brain, does it interact with any pharmaceuticals or other nootropics or anything like that? That would be that's a question I get asked a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, to me, lion's mane is interesting for people. I mean, it's a number one bestseller. It's, I think, the most interesting mushroom for many people, because we can train our bodies, we can build muscle mass, we can watch what we eat, we can do all that, but brain health, this is a really scary thing. And what do we do about that? I think, I've seen my grandfather, slowly go from Parkinson's. I think many people share that experience in their family or know somebody like that. And I think all of us see that and go, okay, that's going to be me one day. And we accept it. And we also, I'm 36 now, you start to lose your keys, get where you parked your car. I've got 3 kids, what are their names again? I start naming them. I've got 2 cats, I've got chicken, how do I keep all these crazy creatures in line?
Yeah.
And we normalize this sort of, slight forms of dementia or onsets of dementia. We normalize the memory loss, we normalize the inability to learn new skills, we normalize it. And we all have things we say, like, I forgot where my keys are. I have half-Heimers, I've heard, half Alzheimer's, half-Heimers.
Senior moments, all of it.
Yeah, senior moments, yeah. And we all laugh and we shrug it off, because we all experience that. It's a shared experience. And it's making light of a pretty serious thing. And I think we have to stop normalizing this. This is not okay. This is not interesting. It's not fun. It's not nice. And we actually know how to solve that, and a lot of it's linked to what's called NGF, or nerve growth factor, or BDMF. I mean, it's usually NGF. And as we know, as we age, we have loads and loads of NGF when we start the whole world, right? Oh my God, you learn how to ride a bike in like 2 days, you can learn how to read in like a year, I mean, you learn a new language in a year. I mean, it's just insanity. I'm watching my kids pick up things way faster than me now, massively faster. And NGF is helping with neuroplasticity. It's helping with neurogeneration. It's doing all those things that we need at the early stages of life. And then we start to see NGF production goes down as we age. And there's actually, there's a woman who won the Nobel Biology Prize back in '86, I think, for discovering NGF. And just like, Merlin Sheldrake, you were talking about earlier, she learned about this NGF, and she immediately said, I need to start supplementing this. This is so important for the brain health that I need to start supplementing it. So she started making it in her lab and taking it as a pill. But she found out pure NGF doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. So you take it as a pill, never gets to the brain, actually where it needs to be to do its job. So she started injecting it in her eyeball. So she would fill up a syringe with NGF and she would shoot it in her eye. And you think biohackers nowadays are hardcore. I mean, this lady.
That's why I was laughing, because like scientists are like that. The Helicobacter pylori guy that just drank it all and gave himself a stomach ulcer. I know people that have done stuff like this just because they're so desperate to prove whatever it is works. But what happened when she put it in her eyeball?
Well, she had great effect. I mean, it worked really well for her. She was taking these memory tests and everything, and she was improving. And I think that, that's great and all, but I'm not going to take it into my eyeball. I mean, most people are just not going to do that. So we actually, nowadays, we found out that a compound in lion's mane called herasenone is actually responsible for NGF production. It crosses the blood-brain barrier, increased NGF production 4 to 8 times. It's a massive increase of NGF. And over time, lion's mane can really improve mental health. And I think that that's really important to note. I think, I watch, people on Instagram every day saying, hey, take my lion's mane when I need to focus. It's a focus pill and I'm going to be able to edit better this afternoon from taking lion's mane. It doesn't really work that way. It's not so fast. Most of the clinical trials, which now we have over 20, are showing, a month of sustained use till you start to see effects. So you really have to commit to a protocol there. And I think that that's an important thing to know with lion's mane. But I mean, when NGF spikes, it's increasing neurogenesis, neuroplasticity. It's regenerating brain cells, but also all nerve cells. So that's, I think you were mentioning this before, it's also our gut, it's our spinal cord, it's everything else that also really needs to get repaired too.
Yeah, so I was going to say that NGF is elsewhere, and I know BNF is more brain derived, but it doesn't stays there. And when they've done studies on lions, I'm sure it was growing a muscle, a nerve in a rat's glute back. So that was the very first one. But yeah, there's more to it than that. And I think, people do sometimes take lion's mane and think it's going to be like modafinil or limitless, and they don't realize it's much more of a slow build up. And I think it's the reverse of what you said. You stop walking into a room and think, why am I in this room? And you can find your car in a car park again. So, I think it's one of these things. If people want to use it, they have to commit to using it for longer and not to expect a sudden boom. But I've had people who've said they had a massive effect in a week. But then with other nootropics and stuff like that, the worse somebody's brain is, the bigger they see an effect when they try and take a supplement. Would you agree there to some extent with lion's mane? If something's really bad, the person's going to notice a big difference quite soon. Whereas for, say, a college student, they may not notice the effect as much.
And I think, I think an important thing to note too is, for these very serious illnesses, let's say dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, alcohol-induced, dementia or alcohol-induced brain, frontal lobe gets really destroyed by alcohol. I was actually, when I was in Spain, one of the doctors there has a clinic. He's very famous in Spain for this, and he's treating people that have kind of self-induced mental health problems, usually alcohol and drugs, like they've really destroyed their brains. And he does, QEEG machine studies. He shows the blood mapping. He can show 30% loss of brain tissue from these patients. I mean, it's really extreme stuff. And they're being usually cared for at home, right? So he tries out a lot of new medicine on them because nothing has been working that great. And what he does is very cheaply, he can test one outcome. And that outcome that he decides is the number of calls that his clinic gets, from his patients. So, these are patients that are, some can dress themselves, some can go outside, but they're having a tough time. And they're at home with their families, and their families will call the clinic and be like, Jorge has tried to drive the car and crashed it in the fence. What do I do? Patricia is not eating her meal. She's just yelling and throwing things. I mean, when their family member gets kind of out of line or gets hard to manage, they call the clinic. If things are going well, they don't call. And what he noticed with a month of taking our lion's mane supplement was almost 80% reduction of phone calls. I mean, it's just phenomenal. Wow. So, just people getting better mental health improvement. They're feeling better. They're able to be, and so what is that going to be after a year? What's that going to be after 2 years? Because we know this effect doesn't just stop. It's not like you regain, brain regeneration and it just plateaus. I mean, you can achieve these states of a, healthy brain like it was in their 20s or 18-year-old. Again, it's not impossible. We don't have to normalize, brain damage. We don't have to normalize memory loss. We don't have to normalize loss of function. These are things of the past, So I think that's why lion's mane is so popular and promises so much right now.
Oh yeah, definitely. It is. I like lion's mane a lot as well. It's just there's so much choice. So just before we wrap up, are there any things that people should know about taking mushrooms? As in, you can take how many at once can you take, and when should people have a break from them? Just sort of housekeeping rules about using them.
I think I take a break every few months at least. Pretty much everything that I do. And then I usually wait a week and I take it again. And I think that's a really healthy thing to do with any kind of supplements that people take. I think we don't really know the effect sometimes. I mean, there's a famous biohacker here in Finland, this Olli Posti, and he talks a lot about how, when he takes any pill, he bites it and opens it up in his mouth and he tastes it to make sure that the vitamin D is not rancid or whatnot. And I think our bodies can give a lot of signals back if something is good and helping or not. And I think those are important signals to pay attention to. So taking a break and checking in with yourself and seeing how you feel, I think is really important. And I especially like, maybe Inka Land from Estonia. So she's doing a lot of really interesting self-experiments, and she's publishing those on YouTube, and she's taking a journal, and she's taking a really, empathetic or introspective approach on trying something out and letting you know how it was for her. And I think that's we should all encompass some of that. don't listen to me, don't listen to Sarah, don't listen to anybody. Try it out for yourself, and take some sort of metric, if that's outer ring data or just a journal you take at night. But find something to really check in with yourself and see how that supplement is working for you, or a diet is working for you, or something.
I think you've touched on something really important, that lots of people are not self-aware and they don't spend enough time just by themselves without being stimulated by social media or other people. Because I obviously have to spend a lot of time on my own, so doing work and such like, and you get to be able to sit with you and your biochemistry, and like you said, you just know if you're in tune with yourself. Whereas if you're constantly on TikTok or watching Netflix or whatever, and your brain's not connected properly to your biochemistry, I think you can really miss when something's not working or when it is helping. That's like a really good point to maybe, and I agree. I always say to people, don't just believe me, do your own research, and my biology is different to yours, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
If people want to follow you or find you or buy Kaapa, what would you say that they do next? If they really liked listening to you, listening to this, what could they do? Where can they learn more?
Yeah, good. I think probably the best place to, I have my own Instagram. I'm not super active, but there's sometimes things being posted there. So it's Eric MT Puro. But there's also, Kaapa Mushrooms has a newsletter, and we're pretty serious about our newsletter. We put a lot of new information on there. We have a lot of studies. I think it's worth your while to take a look at that. And then, of course, kaapamushrooms.com, where you can find products. And yeah.
That's great, because everything I put it always in the description, so people can easily just click on.
Yeah, great.
We talk about and be taken straight to you. So before we wrap up, is there anything else that's a burning mushroom fact you want to drop, or have you, because you've been really generous with your time and your information as usual?
Well, you were talking about Amanita muscaria. We never had.
Right. Yes.
But we have to do another episode, because I think, to me, this is, I think, one of the most interesting mushrooms, actually.
Okay, because that's the other thing. That's why I didn't go into it too much, because there are certain people that are really anti the psychedelic side, and they're really into supplements. So if people know there's going to be an Amanita muscaria special coming up, then they can tune in for that, because I know what you mean. It's a different level of mushrooming than lion's mane. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
But thanks for having me, and thanks for raising consciousness about all this stuff. And I think it's so important to have an hour to discuss these kind of things than just a few snippets here and there.
Oh no, definitely. I know, and I think sometimes people's brains get overloaded. That's why I don't go on too long, but they can always watch this again, and I'm sure you'll be back. And if they know there's an Amanita muscaria episode coming, there are certain people are going to lined up for that. So thanks again, Eric. I really
thanks, Sarah.